Hi everybody, my name is Clint Heffern and this is my EDL 850 Module 1 introduction video. So a little bit about myself, some demographic information. I'm originally from Iola, Kansas, so southeast Kansas. That's where I was born and raised. It's where I went to high school. That's actually where I went to community college. When after I graduated high school, I went to Allen Community College for 2 years, which is also in Iola. So stayed around home for my first 2 years and played baseball and basketball at Allen County, Allen Community College. So like I said, from Iola, the top right picture is my parents, Chuck and Linda, and then the little girl is my niece. She's about 2.5, Mackenzie, and then she's actually got a younger sister who is about a month now, so she's very a newborn. So new to this stuff, becoming an uncle, and my older brother, he has 2 kids now, so that's been fun and been just a new part of life. So yeah, it's been fun. Like I said, went to Allen Community College after high school for 2 years, and then went on to Pitt State for 3 years after that. Graduated, and from there I stayed in Pittsburgh for my first job, which I'll get to later. But I'm still living in Pittsburgh now, and then working on my master's through Fort Hays State University. So work environment, like I said, stayed in Pittsburgh. After I've graduated Pitt State, I've been in Pittsburgh ever since and been working at St. Mary's Colgan. So spent the past 3 years teaching at St. Mary's Colgan, which is a parochial school. It's a part of the Diocese of Wichita. Even though we are in Southeast Kansas, we are a member of the Diocese of Wichita. So it's been interesting to learn about that. It's not a public school. It's been a good experience for me. But I've taught social studies, also taught 1 PE class, and this past year I took on the role of junior high athletic director. So gained a lot of good insight there as well. And then I actually just recently accepted a new position for next school year in Fort Scott. I will be the head basketball coach. So gonna make the move. Gonna be starting at Fort Scott this next school year. Be teaching social studies, and then I'll also have 1 PE class again. And like I said, I'll be the head basketball coach. So it's one of my passions. I really love sports, and especially basketball. And I've always wanted to be a head coach and lead my own program and do things the way I want to do them. And so I'm excited for that challenge. I know it's going to be a challenge, but I'm extremely excited for that. So moving on to kind of the different levels of government and their effect and influence on public education. So first off, support for public schools. What levels of government offer support? What support for public schools? So at the local level, a lot more control here. So they decide, local levels of government decide kind of the specifics of how schools are going to operate if they're given the power from the state, which they typically are. So then this is operated through the school boards. School boards have members that are elected by the people or appointed by councils or mayors. But the school board basically offers a lot of support for the day-to-day interactions, the operations for a public school, whether that's hiring the leadership, the superintendent, the principals, and also helping approving the hirings of all the teachers and that. The local levels of government and the local through school boards, they have a lot of influence on public schools. As well, they pay for just under half of a school's budget, basically for a school's operating costs. They pay for the remainder of the school budget that the state and federal levels do not provide. So typically, like I said, that's around a little less than half. They do this through property taxes on homes and businesses, but they pay for a large chunk of what it takes to operate a school. Going to the state now, the state also pays for about a little under half of a school's operating costs for that year, like with the local levels of government. So the state assumes primary accountability, but usually they delegate their authority to the local school districts, like I said, through the school boards, as mentioned above. State constitutions do give them power to pass laws to mandate throughout the state. So they do have a little more power, but not as much day-to-day interaction and control as like local governments do. But they do implement standards, they gather some data, and they work with federal governments to kind of assess which schools need help and improvement, which ones are doing well, um, uh, kind of working through standardized testing and that type of thing. And like I mentioned, that last bullet point with state here, they typically provide less than half of a school's operating costs, and they do this through income and sales tax. But the local and the state levels pay for and fund 80 to 90% of a school's operating costs. Working into federal here, this last column down here, they don't have as much support or don't offer as much support for public schools. There's two statistics I have with the second and third bullet point here. They account for about 92% of funds for elementary and secondary schools, or excuse me, 92% of funds come from non-federal sources. And so this third bullet point works in and kind of reemphasizes that Congress at the federal level helps fund about 10% of a government-run schools' operating costs. So the federal level is definitely not helping as much with funding, but they do help and play a role. And this quote here, they promote student achievement, preparation for global competitiveness by fostering educational excellence and ensuring equal access. So they do have some standardized testing, such as No Child Left Behind. And if schools and states want to receive that funding that is coming from the federal level, then they will abide by the programs like No Child Left Behind. But federal level, they do have more power if they want it, and they do implement some things. But as far as support, that really is delegated to a state level, and then even more so to a local level with school boards. So working in with that, with the three levels of government, who is in charge? And so, like kind of mentioned, at the local level, it's a school board or a board of education, you might hear it called. They are in charge. And so usually that's members. Those members are elected by the people or appointed by mayor or city council. But these people are really who are in charge of the school district and what happens within the school building. So for instance, they start everything by approving basically all kinds of school activity, whether that's the hiring and firing of new teachers or new administrators or superintendents. That all has to be ran through the school board. And then, if they're adding new buildings or implementing new programs or everything basically throughout the school district has to be approved and ran through the school board. So there's a ton of control here at local levels with the school boards and the school districts. And kind of with my arrow here, the superintendent is in power. That's who's in charge as well, but they are elected by the school board. And then the superintendent helps delegates his power through principals, building principals, who then delegates throughout their building. So, but yes, the local level has a lot of control over actually public schools. At the state level, Kansas State Governor is Laura Kelly. There's a state board of education. There is a federal board, Department of Education. So within the state, there is a state board of education. Our commissioner of education is Randy Watson, who I do not envy him in this time of the coronavirus and making decisions. A lot of big decisions and a lot of new stuff to deal with as we work into next school year. But state level, that's who's in charge. They do standards, assessments, like I mentioned in the last slide, implementing programs across the state, and then helping gather data, to assess that stuff. But who is in charge at the state level? Kansas Governor, Board of Education, Commissioner of Education. At the federal level, we have a United States Department of Education. So there's all kinds of different departments: Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture. We have a United States Department of Education. Secretary of Education is Betsy DeVos. They do help fund some, but they really delegate their power to the state and encourage educating the youth to advocate for global competitiveness. So who is in charge at the federal level? We do have a department specifically at the federal level, and then a Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, and they're supposed to be, experts in their field to help the president and to help make big decisions at the federal level. So they can be experts in their field. This graph over here or this kind of chart I thought was cool. Is seeing who has more control, who has more power. So it's all from the top. So the federal level does have more power and control if they want control, but it's typically always delegated that at the federal level, they delegate their power or their control to the states, and then the states delegate their control to the local units of government to allow them to still be unique at their specific regions. But so there's more control at the local level than at the state, and there's more control at the state level than there is at the federal level. However, my right one over here, there's more power at the federal level than at the state, and more power at the state level than at the local level if they want it. But typically at the federal level, they delegate that power to the state, who then delegates it to the local units. So kind of confusing, but that is how it works. So the standards and how they kind of relate. I thought component 6.1, evaluate, develop, and implement management, communication technology, school level governance, and operating systems that support each student's learning needs and promote the mission and the vision of the school. I thought that this was more of a local level, especially implementing, all of their different things. So the management, the communication, the actual technology, what systems they're going to use for the students' learning needs and promote the mission and the vision of the particular school. I thought this was working with more of a local unit of government. And then component 6.2, evaluate, develop, and advocate for a data-informed and equitable resource planning that supports school improvement and student development. Like I mentioned before, the state level helps gather and assess some data that can then, assess where they need more work, which places are doing well, etc. I thought component 6.2 was more of a state, working with the state level. And then component 6.3, reflectively evaluate, communicate about, and implement laws, rights, policies, and regulations to promote student and adult success and well-being. I thought this was more federal, maybe state and federal, but I thought this was more federal. As far as if the federal level does have the power to implement laws and rights and policies, regulations, to promote student and adult success and well-being. So I thought this was more of a power kind of position where the federal level does have more power. And then also, as students move into adults and become citizens of the United States, the federal level wants all the kids to become good citizens. So I thought this component standard was more of a federal level, or dealt with at the federal level. And then works in with this last question: how does all of this support the educational success and well-being of each student and adult? So as I mentioned before, I taught social studies, and I've been teaching government as well. Government's been one of my classes, and it's been a great learning experience. And a lot of my kids, they really find the word federalism to be kind of it's been a great topic of conversation. Federalism allowing power to be divided, like at the local level, the state level, and the federal level, and all three of those levels to be operating and working on the same group of people at the same time. So it's really cool, and this is what we discuss with my kids all the time. Is there's some power and some known leadership at the top that's got everybody's best interest in mind, or supposed to, and then they can set plans and standards that make all states and people follow to some degree, kind of like No Child Left Behind. Just to push a standard of education out there that's pushing educational excellence, to help create global competitiveness, to ensure that we have an educated population, while at the same time it delegates power to the state and local levels that allows each state or region or even local city to still keep their uniqueness and not be so confined and make even rural and urban cities or places do things the exact same way. So it allows some uniqueness with place to place, all while at the same time working together to get the most out of our students and adults in that specific region, so that then they can positively contribute to the nation as a whole. So it's a really complicated matter, and I still don't fully understand it all, but it's cool that it's a very cool matter as well, that we can have three different levels all operating on the same people at the same time, while still allowing there to be some uniqueness. So I believe this is it. Yeah, here are my references. So thank you guys. Thank you guys for listening.